So one of the questions that came in this week on the Q&A asked about what should you do if you're already gone through your warm-up and you're starting on your event. For example, you're going into squats and you start to still feel like something's off. Something still needs to be warmed up, stretched out, taken care of. What's the best thing to do? And the reason that I wanted to do a video on this one is because this is one of the things that I've talked about in my seminars, that I've got 7 different steps that I like to do and what I would consider an overall warm-up. And that doesn't mean that you have to do 7 different steps. It's that there are different areas of specificity. So if the first thing that you do is get blood flow, like the literal warm-up, increasing the core body temperature, increasing blood flow, is like hopping on a bike or a treadmill or elliptical or whatever it is, like 3 to 5 minutes. And then the next thing that you do is you go into a general stretch. That's basically where most people stop. They do those 2 things. And then they go to their event. They're like, okay, I'm gonna go squat and I'll start off with a lighter weight and work my way up over a couple of sets. And then they just go right into it. The areas that you're missing out on are, once you've done a general stretch, what are the specific stretches for you as an individual? And then what are the stretches that are specific to that day? So if I've had a quad injury and I'm going to be squatting, I might do general stretching that is not specific to squatting. It's just, it's for general mobility. And then I'm going to do something for the quad that I've hurt. There might be a certain stretch that I've been given, whether by my coach or by a physical therapist or chiropractor, to help out with the ongoing rehabilitation process for that quad, and so it doesn't get aggravated again. But then there might also be specific stretches for the quad for squats. And that's not to say that there have to be 2 or 3 different things that I do for the quad. That might only be one thing. The difference is that I'm picking one thing knowing that I'm covering 3 different areas. Or I might be choosing the same technical stretch that I would in my general stretching after warming up on the bike or elliptical, but I might be doing it in a slightly different way or with a slightly different protocol that becomes specific to me for my previous injury, and also specific to the event that I'm doing, squatting. So that takes us to the first 3. And then the things that you do after that are exercises or dynamic movements that, one would be prehab. So I consider this outside of the general stretching. So if you were to do, say, lateral walks, that is both a good warm-up for glute med, TFL, lateralis, but it's also a very good prehab exercise. That is an exercise that is going to help with the lateral muscular engagement, that is going to help with certain hip and knee position when you're going through squats, that prevents mistracking and caving in of the knees. If you were to have a lateral walk on a day that isn't squat day, well then that's just a good prehab for your hips. If you were to do that same thing on squat day, suddenly that general exercise, general prehab exercise, becomes a event specific prehab exercise. And if you've had a glute med or hip injury, then that same thing might also be a individualistic prehab exercise. So you've got 6 layers right there. You've got your generalized dynamic / prehab exercise. You have your event specific prehab, and then you have your individualistic prehab based on past history. Once you've done those 6, then you go to the event. So if you happen to be at the event, again, say you're squatting, and you realize that as you're going through your first couple of warm-up sets, which would be number 7 in the list of steps for warming up that I like to use, and you notice that, hey, my hips still feel a little tight, they feel a little off, they don't feel quite right, whatever that ends up meaning, and you want something to do for it, it's a matter of just going through that checklist and asking, all right, did I do something that hits, these 7 steps in order to help out that specific area? And again, more than likely, you are going to have movements or exercises or stretches that cover multiple criteria. They're not going to be just a general prehab. It's going to be a prehab exercise that also works really well for you as an individual, and that's part of the reason that you even chose it to begin with, because you realize that it tends to help, whether you knew you were doing it or not, you realize that it helps you quite a bit more than something else. And then it also works really well for, say, squat day. You'll find the same thing on, bench day or on deadlift day, or when you're working on clean and jerk, or, snatches, overhead squats, anything like that. But you want to go through that checklist and just ask yourself, did I do something that hit that particular step, always starting as close to the first step as possible, and work your way up through the 7. And if there's an area that you missed, you start there. Hit that, go back to the warm-up sets, try again. Do you still feel like it's off? If it feels better, great, keep going. If it feels better but still isn't quite enough, you go to the next thing. Is there another part of the 7 that you skipped or didn't do as well as you needed to, or needed something different? Then you go to that, and then you come back to your warm-up sets again and see how you feel. It's like, lo and behold, hitting those 7 steps works incredibly well. And if you need help coming up with something that matches all of those 7, then you should be talking to your coach or talk to a practitioner to figure that out. That's not something that you should be trying to figure out on your own, because more than likely you're going to overlook things that an outside set of eyes is going to notice for you. So coming up with those is not only something that you should have help with, from an expert, but it's also something that's going to be slightly different. Like, your 7 steps for squat day is not going to be the same 7 steps as deadlift day or bench day, clean and jerk. And that's just like the strength training part. Like, if you're a soccer player versus a basketball player versus a distance runner, like, you might have 7 steps that you do when you go in for strength training, that you have 7 different things or 7 different steps that you do when you're going to play a match or even practice. And figuring those things out and how they differ can be very, very effective, but it takes a little bit of front end work to put that time in to help figure that out, so that when moments like that happen, when you're going through the warm-up sets, or you're a certain amount of time into what should be your workout or your practice, you can very quickly go back, check the boxes, and say, oh, that's what I need to do. I forgot about that one. Or that's what I need to do a little bit more of. I did it, but I also recognize that what I'm feeling right now could be taken care of if I just go to, say, number 4 and do a little bit more or something else in addition to that. It makes it very, very quick for the in-the-moment decision making.